Hey there, my name's Dave and welcome to another Guitar Zero to Hero song tutorial. In this lesson, I'm going to teach you how to play Enter Sandman by Metallica, which is arguably the most popular metal song of all time. I'm going to teach you all of Kirk Hammett's guitar parts and all of James Hetfield's guitar parts. Now the guitar I'm using in this lesson is the ESP LDT KH202, so that's the entry-level Kirk Hammett signature guitar. I'm also using the KH95 Crybaby wah for the lead guitar solo, but any other wah pedal will get you more or less the same result. I'll leave a link to all these in the description below if you want to find out more. Now, if you want to master your chords back to front, then be sure to head over to guitarzerotohero.com to pick up my free guitar ebook. Or if you're brand new to guitar and you're looking to build a strong and solid foundation, but you don't know where to start, then check out the Guitar Zero to Hero Premium course and membership, which gives you all the guidance to play with confidence. I'll leave a link to it in the description below. Let's jump into the lesson. Okay, I'm going to start off by teaching you all of James Hetfield's guitar parts, the rhythm guitars. Let's start off with the clean riff in the intro. It's really nice and simple. There's just basically one bar of music and it's being repeated and looped again and again. I'm going to teach you the easy fretting for this first, and this is more geared towards beginners who are just new to guitar. Then I'll teach you how James Hetfield actually frets this, and it's a little bit trickier and a little bit stretchier on the fingers, so that's why it's not really suitable for beginners. So we're going to start off in this position here for the easy method. Ring finger on the 7th fret of the 5th string, index finger on the 5th fret of the 4th string. Now we're going to start with the open 6th string, and this occurs on the end beat after the 4. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. And this will be an ongoing thing throughout this song, where a lot of the times the start of the riffs really occur on the end beat after the 4. They're on that upbeat. So after that open string, we're going to pick it back up in the next bar on the end beat after the 1 with the 5th string and then the 4th string. Then we're going to hit the 6th fret of the 6th string with our free middle finger here. So put that onto the 6th fret, pluck that, and then with your index finger move it up to the 5th fret of the 6th string. So those 4 notes, and 2 and 3 and. Now finally on the 4 beat, we're going to hit the 5th string, and that is the end of our loop. Okay, so starting from the start, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Now from here, we're just going to loop that section again and again. So to loop it, we'll just lift our index finger and get it back into that 5th fret of the 4th string position, and then repeat. And 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And we just keep repeating that again and again. And notice how the loop always starts on the end beat after the 4, that first open 6th string. And I'll just play through this first line of tab. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Let's quickly take a look at how James Hetfield actually frets this. He puts his pinky finger on the 7th fret of the 5th string and middle finger on the 5th fret of the 4th string. When he gets to the 6th fret of the 6th string, he uses his free ring finger to fret that. And then when he goes down to the 5th fret, uses his index. But the whole time he's keeping his pinky and ring finger planted there. So that will sound like this. The first line of tab. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 2 and 3 and 4. Now that's a little bit stretchy. Personally, it's not very comfortable for me. So in the playthrough at the end, I'll be using the simple method. So that clean riff is played through for another 2 lines of music, essentially. Now, when we get to the very end of the 3rd line of tab, we're going to kick into some distortion. Now, for my particular Boss Katana patch, I'm using a lead amp channel. I don't have the gain up too high, it's around about 60, and then I've added a tube screamer to the signal chain, and that's pretty much it. And we're still using the bridge pickup here. So on the end beat after the 4 here, at the end of this 3rd line of tab, we're going to go to an E power chord, and what I do is I just put my index finger here on the 2nd fret of the 5th string, and I'm just focusing on the 6th and 5th strings here. Now with power chords, it's really important that you mute all the other strings that you're fretting. So ensure that the 4th, 3rd, 2nd, and 1st strings are muted by just lightly resting your index finger across those strings and only fretting that 2nd fret of the 5th string. That way, if you really just dig into the strings, you're only getting that power chord and none of these open strings that might make it sound a little messy. This is really important when you're playing with power chords and metal in general with heavily distorted tones. So that's on the end beat after the 4 and 1. And then we're going to pick it back up with some palm mutes on the end beat after the 1. And this is what I call build up riff number 1. So we're going to pick it back up and we're going to palm mute. So to palm mute, take the fleshy bit of your palm, rest it lightly on the edge of the bridge, and we're going to pluck at 8th notes, starting with the end beat after the 1. And 2 and 3 and 4. On the final end beat after the 4, we're going to take our ring finger and just slide up to the 7th fret. Now you can slide up from anywhere, really. It doesn't particularly matter because that slide is pretty quick. So put your ring finger onto the 5th string and hit it and slide up to the 7th fret. Now that 5th string note isn't palm muted, only the open strings are. So taking it back, and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. For the next 3 bars, it's pretty much the same, except we are palm muting on that first downbeat. And so taking it back and playing through build up riff number 1. And 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, now we're going to play build up riff number 2. So for build up riff number 2, we start off with 2 palm mutes. And then we're going to do our slide up to the 7th fret. Then with our middle finger, 6th fret of the 6th string. And then back to open E palm mutes. So 3 times, 3 and 4. And then we're going to play an F5 power chord. So index finger on the 1st fret of the 6th string and pinky finger on the 3rd fret of the 5th string. Now again, with power chords, we want all the other strings muted, and you do that by lightly resting your index finger across all of them whilst only pushing down that 1st fret of the 6th string. So that way you can strum all the strings and you still get that really refined power chord sound. So this bar in total, 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and... So notice how all the open strings are palm muted. The only thing that isn't palm muted is that 7th and 6th fret, and then the F5 at the end. We're gonna repeat that again 4 times, and this is build up riff number 2 for the intro. 1, 2, 3. Okay, now we have build up riff number 3. Now build up riff number 3 is pretty much the same as build up riff number 2, but we add 1 extra note. So we're slowly adding to this riff. So after the 6th fret of the 6th string, we're going down to the 5th fret of the 6th string. That is the extra note that we're adding in. Everything else is the same though. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. So repeat that again and again. We basically repeat that through more or less 8 times. Now the 8th time, we are going to actually, instead of hitting the F5 power chord, hit the E5 power chord, like we have before, and then go into the main rock out riff. But before that, I'll just play through build up riff 3 4 times. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so let's take a look at the main riff. Now, similar to the intro, this main riff sort of starts on the upbeat or the end beat after the 4. All right, so with that E5, then we pick it back up on the end beat after the 1 with the open 6th string. Then we're going to hit those 3 notes that we had in build up riff number 3. So 7th fret, 6th, 5th. Then there's 1 open 6th string with a palm mute, and that's on the 4 beat. So that is the loop section, and 1, 2, and 3, and 4. So it's really important To really get that groove right, you gotta palm mute on that 4 beat with the open 6th string. Now we're going to repeat that section again and again, and remember, we're always basically starting on the end beat after the 4. So we're playing that through 3 times. And 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. Now we're going to get to the little tag at the end of this line of tab. So we're going to start with the G power chord, and this occurs on the end beat after the 4. Now that's strummed like normal. Everything from this point onwards will now be palm muted. So you'll drop your palm lightly on the bridge, and we're going to hit open 6th string, then move down to the F sharp 5 power chord, open 6th string one more time, back to that power chord, and then move up to the G, back down, and in total. On the end beat after the 4, we'll go back to the E5, which will then restart that whole riff again. So I'll now just play through the last 2 lines of tab here for the intro. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4. 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 For the very final end beat after 4, we're going to hit the E5 again, and that will take us into verse number 1. All right, so we're moving to verse number 1. We start off with that E5 on the end beat after 4. We'll pick it back up on the end beat after 1, and we'll just be palm muting this power chord at 8th notes in the very end of the bar, the end beat after 4. We'll just hit the F5. Okay, so and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. For the next bar, it's just E palm muted and that F5 at the very end. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. For the third bar, it's just that E palm muted again. But on the end beat after 4, we're going to play that end section that we had at the main riff. So and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. So in total for the first line of tab, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. On the end beat after the 4, we'll go back to the E5 and continue on again. So the second line of tab is almost the same as the first line of tab, but at the very end, instead of going back to another E5 power chord, we're going to an F sharp note. And this is going to take us to kind of like the pre-chorus riff before we jump into the chorus. Okay, so on the end beat after the 4, we hit that 2nd fret of the 6th string. Then with your ring finger or your pinky, it doesn't really matter. It's up to you. I use my ring finger here. I'm going to hit the 4th fret of the 4th string, but palm mute it as well, if you can. Not entirely necessary, but it's more accurate. So palm mute, and then I take my index finger up to the 2nd fret of the 3rd string, and then with my middle finger, 3rd fret of the 5th, down to the 2nd fret of the 5th. So those 4 notes. And then on the 4 beat, back to the 4th fret of the 4th string. And that is our loop section, starting with the end beat after the 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. I'm going to loop it again and again until the 4th bar, where we just are going to slide out and go to the chorus. That's it for verse 1, so this is how it's going to sound. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Now, one thing to note, that pre-chorus riff, James Hetfield does fret it again in quite an unusual way. He uses his pinky finger here on the 4th fret of the 4th string, middle finger on the 2nd fret of the 3rd string, and index finger on that 2nd fret of the 6th string. And he plays it like this. Again, it's not very comfortable for me, so I don't really like playing it like this, but this is how James does it. Etc, etc. But yeah, really not comfortable for my hands, so you'll see me play it the other way. Okay, now we get to the chorus. The chorus is pretty simple. There's 2 lines of tab here, but we need to be mindful of the upbeats here where the chords change. So we're going to play an F#5 power chord. Hold that out. On the end beat after the 2, we're going to go to the C5 power chords. So 3rd fret of the 5th string, pinky finger on the 5th fret of the 4th string. Again, we don't want any other strings to be ringing out other than the ones we're fretting down. Now, for a 5th string power chord, this means we want our 6th string muted. And to do that, I lightly touch it with the top of my index finger. So it's not ringing out, it's muted. And then with the 3rd, 2nd, and 1st strings, that's muted by my index finger lightly touching those strings. So that when I strum, you're only getting that C5 power chord ringing out. So C5 down to B, and so far 1, 2, and 3, and 4. On the end beat after the 4, we go back to the F#5. And 1, and 2, and 3, and 4. Again, we'll go back to the F#5 on the end beat after the 4. And 1, and 2, and 3, and 4. And on this final end beat after the 4, we're going to hit the E5 power chord. And then hold that out for the final 4th bar. For the 2nd line of tab, F#5, C, B, and then on the end beat after the 4, E5, hold that out. Now for this final bar, this riff is very similar to the end of the main riff, but there's a tiny little difference here. So we're going to start with the G5, and the first half of this is palm muted. So G5, open 6th string, F#5, open 6th string. Then we're going to go back to the F#5, but not palm muted here. Up to the G5 twice, and then end with the E5. So 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and... That's it for chorus number 1, which sounds like this in total. Be mindful of where the chords change. A lot of the time, it's on the end beat after 4. 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, and 3, 4, 2, 3, 4. Next is the break. It's basically that main riff at the end of the intro, which sounds like this. So nothing new to learn there. Then there's verse 2, which is identical to verse number 1. Now we get to chorus 2, which is almost the same as chorus 1, but there's one extra bar here at the very end. So at the end of that E5, hold that out to the next bar. And again, on the end beat after 4, at the very end, we're going to hit the E5 again. And this takes us into the solo section. Now for the solo section, we're essentially playing the main heavy riff through twice. At the very end of the second time that we play the main riff, we're then going to go pretty much into that pre-chorus riff. Etc, etc. And then for the next 2 lines of tab, it's basically the same as the chorus. So this sort of section. 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, 2, and 3, and 4. Etc, etc. So essentially the solo section is comprised of parts that we've already learned. If you want to see it in context, go to the playthrough at the end of this lesson. Okay, next is the bridge. Now for the bridge, we are going to go back to the intro riff, and that is played again and again until we basically get to the pre-chorus riff again. At this point, we switch back to our distortion, play the pre-chorus. Now for the very last 2 bars, we are going to actually build up the F#5 power chord. So for the final line of tab, 1, 2, 4. Now we get to chorus 3. Chorus 3 is a little bit longer than chorus 1 and 2. First line of tab's the same as the other choruses. The second line of tab we are going to go F sharp 5, C5, and B5, and then to the E5. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3. And at the very end, on the 4 end, we're going to hit the E5 with palm mutes. So 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4. Finally, the third and the fourth line of tab are basically the same as chorus number 2, so nothing new to learn there. If you want to see chorus 3 in context, go to the playthrough at the end of this lesson. Now let's take a look at the outro. Now the outro is actually quite clever because it's like a build down instead of a build up. So the riffs that we learned at the start of this song are being played in a reverse order. So we'll start off with the main rock out riff. And interestingly, it's a little bit different here because we're repeating that main section through 7 times and then add the tag at the end. So the rock out section in the outro. And 1, 2, 3, 4. Now at this point, we'll go to build up riff number 3. So we're going to go back in reverse order, and that sounds like this. So that's something we've already learned in an intro. I'm not going to go into it in detail. Then it goes to build up riff number 2. So we are dropping that 5th fret note. So 1, 2, 3, 4, again and again. And then we're going to end the song with a riff that we haven't actually played previously. Basically all palm mutes on the open 6th string, except on the 2 beat where we'll slide up to the 7th fret. So 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and that's played until the end of the song. In the recording, there's a fade out, but when they play this live, they'll just end the song with the tag that's at the end of the main riff. So that's how I'm going to end this song in the playthroughs at the end. But that's everything for James Hetfield's guitar parts. There's some really clever songwriting here, and there's a lot of consideration here to the timing. So you really need to make note of where those chord changes are happening, and a lot of times they are happening on the end beat after the 4. Not always, but a lot of the time. Okay, now let's take a look at all of Kirk Hammett's guitar parts, aka the lead guitar parts. For a good majority of this song, Kirk is basically playing what James is playing, so a lot of it we have already learned. But let's get stuck into it and I'll let you know where the differences occur. All right, so Kirk Hammett's parts start off with some wah. Now, if you don't have a wah pedal, it doesn't really matter. You can kind of leave the wah parts out and just play the notes themselves without the effect. It's not going to sound exactly the same as a recording, but you can still get by. So Kirk just starts off by hitting the top half of an E minor chord. And then you can just use the wah to go down and up and down and up. So stylistically, you can kind of just do whatever you want there. For the next line of tab, he does the exact same thing. And then for the third line of tab, he's going to turn off the wah, and we're just going to use straight distortion now from this point. So at the end of the third line of tab, we are going to then hit an E5 power chord. And we're just going to let that ring out again and again for 4 bars. At the end of the fourth line of tab, we're going to do that again. Hold that out until the end of the 5th line of the tab, where we're going to hit an A power chord. So you just drop your index finger down to the 2nd fret of the 4th string and focus on the open 5th and 4th strings. And that's going to occur on the end beat after the 2, the end beat after the 3, and then we go back to the E5 on the end beat after the 4. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... Now at this point, we'll then play some power chords. So we'll start with an A sharp 5. So that's 6th fret of the 6th string and 8th fret of the 5th string. Again, you want to mute the 4th, 3rd, 2nd and 1st strings, and you do that by lightly touching them with your index finger as you're fretting the 6th string. So A sharp 5 down to A5, and that occurs on the end beat after the 2 and the 3 beat. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and then on the end beat after the 4 back to the E. All right, so taking it back to the 4th bar in the 5th line of tab. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and So we're going to repeat that again through another line of tab. And then for the very last 2 lines of tab, it is basically the main rock out riff. And this is exactly what James Hetfield plays as well. So I've already taught you this. If you want a breakdown of it, head back to the earlier part of this lesson where I break it down note for note, but it will sound like this. So that's it for the intro. If you want to see it in context, go to the playthrough at the end of this lesson. We get to verse number 1, and this is identical to what James Hetfield plays, so you can just refer to that earlier in this video. Okay, now we get to chorus 1. The first 3 bars are identical to what James Hetfield plays, so it's that F sharp 5 power chord, the C5, and down to B5. The timing's identical as well. Where things change is in the 4th bar here. Now this riff starts on the end beat after the 1, and it's the ring finger on the 7th fret of the 5th string. We'll palm mute that, and then go to the 5th fret of the 4th string. Back to the 7th fret with the palm mute, then pinky finger 7th fret of the 4th string. Back to the 7th fret of the 5th string, and then up to the 4th fret of the 3rd. And then down to 5th fret of the 4th. And that's it for this 4th bar, which goes like this. 1, and 2, 3, and 4, and... Then for the second line of tab, we go down to the 4th fret of the 4th string. Hold that out. Then for the second bar, we'll go back to this 7th fret, and then 4th fret of the 4th string, back to the 7th fret, then 5th fret of the 4th string, back to the 7th fret with the palm mute, and then 7th fret of the 4th string, and then back to the 7th fret of the 5th string. So we're constantly alternating between the 5th string and the 4th string. And at the very end of this chorus, we go to an E5, and that takes us to the break. So in total for chorus 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so for the break, it's almost the same as what James Hetfield's playing, but there's a lead section here, and this happens for basically the last 2 bars of music. So the first part's the same as what James is playing, it's the main riff. At this point, this is where the lead break happens. You'll take your index finger, bar across the 12th frets of the 3rd and 2nd strings, then 14th fret of the 4th, back to the 12th fret of the 3rd, 14th, and so far. Then you're going to hit the 14th fret again, pull off to 12th, down to 14th, back up to 12th fret. Then with my ring and pinky finger, I go on the 14th fret of the 3rd and 2nd string, hit that and bend up. And then at the end, just bar my index finger across the 12th frets of the 1st and 2nd and slide that out. So... And in total for the break. Now for this lead part, if we want to add some wah, this is how we're going to do it. All right, so we'll turn on the wah just before the lead part comes in. And where I've got the crosses is where I'm going to be pushing down the pedal basically. And the circles mean an open wah, where I pull the wah up like this. Closed is down, open is up. I've got the pedal positions shown in the tab below. Again, there is no real right or wrong here. Wah is a stylistic choice, so as long as you're hitting the right notes, the wah can kind of be anywhere more or less, but this is kind of close to what KIRK is doing. Now to simplify this, I'm basically pushing down the wah at the start of the lead, on the 2 beat, the 3 beat, the end beat after the 4, and then on the very last hit of the solo section. And one more time. Okay, now we get to verse 2. Now verse 2 is almost the same as verse 1, but there's this one little lead section, and that's at the end of the 4th bar. So after the G5 power chord, we're then going to turn on our wah. We're then going to go to the 12th fret of the 3rd and 2nd strings. We're going to hit this 3 times on the 2, 3, and 4 beat. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And on the end beat after 4, down to the 14th fret of the 4th strings. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4. And we'll pick back up the palm muting on the 2 beat on the next line of tab. So if you want to see in context, go to the playthrough at the end of this lesson, but that little lead break is pretty simple. Now for the wah here in this little lead section, I'm basically just pushing the wah down each time I'm playing a note. And that will sound like this. Then we have chorus 2, which is more or less the same as chorus 1 in terms of those lead licks that KIRK plays. Then we get to the toughest part of the song, which is KIRK's guitar solo. So first off, we'll teach you how to play this without a wah, and then after we've dissected all the notes, I'll then tell you roughly whereabouts that wah pedal should be going down and up. We're going to start on the 14th fret of the 3rd string, pinky finger on the 15th fret of the 2nd. We're going to bend this up like that. So keep your pinky finger where it is, but just bend your ring finger and use your middle finger behind it to bend up. That's going to be on the end beat after 4. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. We're going to hit those 2 strings again with the same bends. And then 14th fret, pull off to 12th. Back to 14th fret with 2 more bends. Just by itself. And the total. For the next section, it's basically the same, but the last 2 bends at the end are the 15th fret of the 2nd string. Like that. And so the second section. And that's the first line of tab. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Next, we're going to play a bunch of octaves. So start with your index finger on the 10th fret of the 5th string, pinky on the 12th fret of the 3rd. Now we only want these 2 strings to ring out. Everything else will be muted, and you strategically do that with your index finger. So index finger lightly touches the 6th string, and then it lightly rests across all the other strings. So when you strum everything, it's only those 2 notes. So we're going to hit this and slide up to the 12th and 14th. And then we're going to do another down, up strum after that. So down, down, up. And for the next section, it's the same, but in the opposite direction. So hit this octave and slide down, down, up. So down, down, up, down, down, up. And then we repeat that first half again. For the next bar, we go up to 14th fret of the 3rd string, hit that and pull off to 12th, and then 14th fret of the 3rd string. So that's the first little lick. We do the same thing for the next lick, but on the lower strings. And then for this final lick, we'll hit the 14th fret, slide down to 12th, down to 10th fret, and then end on 12th fret of the 6th string. So the final lick. And the bar in total. So the second line of tab in total. Okay, for this next line of tab, we're going to go to the 15th fret of the 2nd string and then index finger on the 12th fret of the 1st string. We're going to be doing a lot of bends here and they're going to be fairly quick. So bend up on the 2nd string and then pluck up on the 1st string. Those 2 pitches should pretty much match. And we're going to basically play those 2 notes at 16th notes for the whole bar. So 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and For the next bar, we'll start off the same way with a bend and then 1st string and then another pluck. So, and then we're going to hit the 1st string, hammer on and pull off very quickly to the 15th, like that, down to the 15th fret of the 2nd, and then another hammer and pull off. So that's the first half of the bar. Then for the second half, hammer on and pull off. 15th fret of the second, hammer on, pull off, pluck that first string again, and then go up to the 14th fret twice. So the second half. And the bar in total. And this line of tab in total. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a. And play it at a faster speed. For this next line of tab, we're going to pluck the 17th fret of the first string with your pinky, pull off to the 14th, and then with your middle finger, go to 15th fret of the second string. Like that. We play that twice, and then end with one more pull off. Alright, so this first half. Then move up to 19th fret and 15th fret and pull off there. And with your middle finger, go to 17th fret of the second string. Those are our 3 notes. Play that twice. And one more pull off. So that bar in total. Then we go up to 21st fret and 17th fret. Now you'll bar your index finger across the 17th frets. We'll play those 3 notes, so pull off, second string, and do that again. Now for this final pull off, we're going to hit 21st fret, pull off to 17th, and pretty much hit the open string, or pull off to the open string. And then go up to 22nd fret, pluck that, and bend it up a full tone. Like that. So the final bar. Now at the very end of this bar, we then shift to the 9th fret of the 3rd and 2nd string, and we're going to hit these 2 strings together with our ring and pinky, and bend that up. But that's at the very end of this bar, so let's take it back. Okay, we're going to continue hitting those 9th fret double stops with the bend. And we're going to do that another 4 times. Then 7th fret of the 3rd string, 9th fret of the 4th. And to end this, hammer on from 7th to 9th, 7th fret of the 3rd, and up to 10th fret of the 2nd. And let's take it back. For the next line of tab, hit this 10th fret again, pull off to 8th, down to 7th. So then 9th fret of the 3rd. Back up to the 7th fret of the 2nd, hammer on and pull off. 9th fret of the 3rd, back up to the 7th fret, back to the 9th fret of the 3rd, pull off, down to 9th fret of the 4th, and back up to the 7th fret. So a lot to digest there, but take it one step at a time. And then for the next bar, back to the 9th fret of the 3rd string, pull off on the 4th string, 9th fret, back up to 7th fret, back to 9th, pull off, 9th, 8th, 7th, 5th, and then end on the 7th fret of the 6th string. This bar. And this line of tab in total. For the next line of tab, 16th fret of the 3rd string, hit that and bend up a full tone. Then 14th fret, and then 16th fret. And 16th fret one more time. And those 4 notes together. Repeat those 4 notes again and again. And we add one more 14th fret of the 3rd string at the very end of this line of tab. So it will sound like this. For the next line of tab, we'll go 16th fret with our ring finger, bend it up, and have your pinky finger on the 17th fret of the 2nd string. Bend up on that 3rd string, and then pluck up on the 2nd. We're going to do that essentially 3 times. And then one more time where we hit both strings together. And then you slowly release that bend. So this line of tab. But we also will be using our whammy bar here too. So on that final bend, and you hit that whammy bar at 8th notes. So 2 and 3 and 4 and like that. You can just like tap it with the side of your hand. One more time. For the next line tab, 21st fret, 17th fret, ready with our pinky finger. So we're gonna pluck this 21st fret, pull off, and pull off to open string. So like that. We're gonna do that twice. And then one more time, but quickly. So. And we do that again. Then for the final bar, 22nd fret. And we're just going to bend this a few times and hit it with a da 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 da. Like that. So this line tab. For the next line tab, we go down to the 10th fret of the 2nd string, hit this pull off to the 8th, 7th, and then 9th fret of the 3rd string. So for the next little lick, it's pull off from the 9th fret to the 7th, and 9th fret of the 4th string. So then for the next lick, hit this 9th fret, slide down to 7th, and then 5th fret. So this lick. For the next lick, we go back up to the 7th fret. We're going to hit this and bend. And then 5th fret, 7th fret of the 5th string. So that lick. And at the very end, we'll hit the 5th fret of the 5th string, hammer onto 7th. And then down to 4th fret, hold that out. And then the final 2 notes, open 5th string, and the B note, 2nd fret. So let's take it back. And we can use our whammy bar here on that very final note. We can just whack it at 8th notes. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... So just think about the 8th notes. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and that's how you can chop the whammy bar. That is everything for the solo. There's quite a lot to digest there, but I would suggest just taking it line by line, just trying to remember each line before moving on to the next one. Practice it slow. This is how it's going to sound at a slower speed. Okay, let's take a look at the wah for the solo. Now again, stylistically, it's kind of up to you. These are just my suggestions. So for the first line of tab, this is kind of what I do. And again, just follow the notation below. Where there's a cross, I'm closing the wah pedal, meaning I'm pushing it down. And where there's a circle, it means I'm opening it, which means my foot is up like that. So the first line of tab. Now, for the second line of tab, I'm basically pushing down on the beat. So my foot is tapping 1, 2, 3, 4, and along with the octaves, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I continue that on with the second bar. 1, 2, 3, 4. For this next line tab, I start with the wah open and I'm gradually closing it. Now at this point, I'm gonna close the wah every time I do a hammer on, basically, and at the start of this bar. So this line of tab in total. For this next line tab, the wah is closing every time I start with a pull off. So now for the double stops here, I'm basically closing the wah every time I play a double stop. So. And then for the next line of tab, I'm basically closing the wah on the beat. So I'm just tapping my foot 1, 2, 3, 4. For the next line of tab, again, I'm basically just tapping my foot on the beat. And for the next line of tab, I'll start off by just closing it. But then I'll open it at that very last bend whilst I hit the whammy bar. So one more time. Then I'll quickly close the wah. And for the next line of tab, I'm not really doing anything. I'm just keeping it closed. And then for this last bit, I'm just kind of closing the wah for every small section. Again, what I've shown in the tab are just suggestions, and sometimes I don't even follow them exactly as I've shown. So wah is a stylistic choice and you can kind of experiment. There are many times though that the wah is kind of going with the rhythm of whatever you're playing. Wah is a little bit of a tricky thing. I would not introduce the wah until you have mastered the notes. So master the solo first without any wah, know how to play it back to front, and then introduce the wah into your lead. The reason why is because you're adding another rhythmic element. You're using your foot to kind of time the wah. You got two hands that are working and a foot that's going at different rates to your fingers. So there's a lot going on. Don't introduce the wah until you're comfortable with just playing it without the wah. Okay, so then there's the bridge. Now Kirk Hammett comes back in when that pre-chorus riff hits. So he continually plays that again and again until he gets to the third chorus. Now for the third chorus, the first line of tab is the same as the first line of tab for the other choruses. Now for the second line of tab, we do the F sharp 5, C5, B5, and then E5. On the 4N, there's 2 palm mutes. And then the third and fourth line of tabs are identical to chorus number 2. So nothing new to really learn there. Head to the playthrough at the end of the lesson if you want to see it in context. Now for the outro, Kirk basically plays the exact same thing that James plays, but he comes in a little bit later. To be exact, he comes in when the drums come in. If you want an explanation on that outro, head to James Hetfield's part earlier on in this lesson. And that's everything for Kirk Hammett's lead guitar parts. So now I'll be doing 3 playthroughs of this song. The first playthrough will be a combined playthrough, so most of James Hetfield's guitar parts and then the solo in the middle. This is kind of suited for the players out there who just kind of want to do it all in the one song. After that, I'll be doing 1 playthrough of all of James Hetfield's guitar parts, and then I'll be doing a full playthrough of all of Kirk Hammett's guitar parts. Feel free to play these back as many times as you'd like to practice, play along to, and see how you go. Thanks so much for watching. If you've enjoyed this lesson, then I know you'll absolutely love these other lessons too. So hit the link here. Or if you want to grab a copy of my free guitar ebook, then head over to guitar0tohero.com or click the link here. Thanks so much, and I'll see you guys next time on Guitar Zero to Hero. Cheers.